Georgia is a very unique and special state in that we have 6 different ecological provinces or ecoregions. In the northern part of the state, we have the mountains, and then around Atlanta, we have the Piedmont, which is characterized by that red clay soil we all know and love. And then further south is the coastal plain, and that's where the soil is very sandy and where our ancient coastline used to cover. All of those different ecoregions have their own types of soils and therefore their own types of plants that grow there and different types of wildlife that are attracted there. Some species are generalist and they can live in any of those areas, and others are very specific needs on where they can live. For example, the gopher tortoise, because it digs burrows in the ground, it can't live any further north than that fall line. It only lives in the coastal plain, because if it tried to dig a burrow up in the Piedmont, it wouldn't get very far. Within those 6 ecoregions of Georgia are various types of habitats. And with all that variety, our state lends itself well to a lot of rich diversity in wildlife. A wildlife ecosystem is a community of different species, plants and animals, that interact with each other, as well as the things in the environment, the non-living things, such as rocks and water and soil. Wildlife need habitat to survive. That's their home. Within a forest, a lot of animals can find the things that they need to survive. Every animal needs food, water, shelter, and space. Within their home range and easily accessible, they need all of those things. Wildlife that are looking for food in the forest, they may go after different shrubs that produce berries or other types of fruit. It could be a flowering dogwood or a persimmon or a blueberry shrub, and we call those types of fruits soft-mast. And other wildlife may go after nuts and seeds and trees, such as oaks or hickories, or even, a squirrel chewing on a pine cone. And we call that hard mast. During the succession of a forest, depending on what stage it's in, is going to somewhat dictate what kinds of animals you find there. Some animals prefer early successional stages where you have a lot of grasses and weeds and maybe some thickets. And then others prefer a more mature forest or a late successional stage where you have mature hardwoods. If a forest has trees that are too close together and there's no sunlight getting down to the ground, then there's no food or forage for wildlife. There's none of the berry producers or grasses that different species would eat. And it becomes kind of dead for wildlife, a dead space for wildlife at that point. So if it's managed sustainably, where each tree is spaced apart, it's been thinned well, it'll be thin enough for sunlight to get through and for that ground cover to grow that wildlife rely upon. A forest habitat can be enhanced for wildlife by considering their needs as well as your goals for timber management. If a forest has plenty of layers in it, vertical layers, you've got ground cover, you've got a mid-story, you've got a canopy, then you've got lots of different places for wildlife to live. And so sometimes that will require specific management. For example, a land manager may want to set a prescribed fire through an area to prevent the area from becoming too brushy and woody and crowding things out. And by doing that and cutting back some of the hardwoods that they're not wanting there, then you can create more space for ground forage. Loss of habitat is the #1 reason for a decline in a wildlife population. Whether it's a road being built or a subdivision or a shopping mall, or it could even be habitat alterations, such as a forest being turned into an agricultural field. All of those things can change up the food, water, shelter, and space that are available for wildlife, and that can greatly affect their populations. But there are some other threats to wildlife. Invasive species are another one. So these are plants that are not from Georgia, and they don't play as nicely with the other plants here. So they tend to take over, and then the plants that the wildlife are used to using are no longer there. Wherever you live, you can help wildlife by creating habitat. And that could be by managing a forest on your property if you live in a more remote area of Georgia, or if you're in Metro Atlanta and you have just a tiny little space that you want to plant some perennials for pollinators, for example. Then all of that helps to connect the dots of wildlife habitat that have otherwise been fragmented by development.